Shock. Bringing Up Bates stars Erin and Chad Paine arrested. For years, Erin Bates and Chad Paine were seen as the picture of grace, gentle, faithful, and devoted to family. Their lives, often shared with fans who admired their warmth and honesty, seemed untouched by scandal or chaos. But what began as an ordinary morning in their Tennessee home would soon become a moment the entire Bates family, and everyone who ever knew them, would never forget. The sun rose softly over the hills, brushing gold light across their peaceful home. Erin was up early, humming quietly as she folded laundry, the faint laughter of her children echoing from another room. Chad brewed coffee, his routine steady, simple, filled with gratitude. To anyone watching, it was just another blessed morning. But in the stillness of that hour, something felt strangely heavy. The air seemed colder. A silence lingered behind every sound. The kind of silence that carries an unseen weight. Then, without warning, that peace was shattered. A sudden knock. Firm. Repeated. It wasn't the sound of a friendly neighbor, nor the soft tap of a delivery. It was sharp. Demanding. Unmistakably official. Chad glanced at Erin, confusion flashing in his eyes. He walked to the door, wiping his hands nervously on his jeans. The children went quiet, their games forgotten. When the door opened, two officers stood there, one older, his face unreadable. The other young, his eyes filled with something that looked like regret. "Are you Chadwick Paine?" one of them asked. "Yes, sir," Chad replied, his voice uncertain. "And your wife, Erin Elise Paine, is she home?" Erin stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding. The officer's tone didn't change. Calm, but heavy. "Ma'am, sir, we have warrants for your arrest." For a second, the words didn't make sense. Arrest. The sound of it hung in the air like smoke. Erin blinked, almost smiling in disbelief. "There must be a mistake," she said quietly, her voice breaking. The children began to cry. The officer stepped forward. And in that moment, everything about that peaceful family morning unraveled. Neighbors started to notice. Curtains shifted. Phones lifted. Someone whispered the words no one expected to hear. "Erin and Chad are being taken away." The scene unfolded in silence, except for the cries of their youngest child calling for mommy. Erin turned, trying to reach out, but her hands were trembling. Chad's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "It's going to be all right. God knows." The flashing blue lights painted the white walls of their home. The sound of handcuffs clicked softly, too real, too cold. As they were led to the waiting car, Erin's face turned once more toward her home. The toys on the porch, the half-finished breakfast, the life that had just been torn apart. Inside the car, she stared out through tears, the town blurring past. A life of love and faith, now replaced by questions, fear, and disbelief. No one knew the full truth yet. No one understood why. But everyone could feel it. Something had broken that morning. And the Bates world, once known for its light, was now wrapped in a shadow it had never seen before. By the time the sun climbed high over the Tennessee sky, the whispers had already become headlines. Erin and Chad Paine arrested. The word spread like wildfire, first through quiet texts between neighbors, then across Facebook groups, and finally on every major tabloid page that had ever followed the Bates family. Screens lit up with disbelief. Fans who had watched their love story unfold, their weddings, their faith, their children's laughter, now stared at their phones in shock. Comments flooded in. Some defended them instantly, others demanded to know the truth. But no one knew the truth. Not yet. Inside the county sheriff's office, Erin sat in a small, cold room, her hands folded tightly together. The soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Her eyes were red, her face pale, but her heart was steady. Chad sat across from her, his wedding ring catching the faint light as he kept whispering prayers under his breath. Their lives had always been guided by faith, by the belief that God brings strength in the darkest storms. But now even faith felt fragile. Outside, the parking lot filled with cameras. Reporters stood behind police tape, speaking words Erin couldn't hear. Only see through the narrow window. She turned away, unable to bear it. This wasn't the image she had built her life on. This wasn't who they were. Back at the Bates home, the phone never stopped ringing. Kelly Jo's hands trembled as she picked up call after call. Her voice broke each time she said, "We don't know anything yet." Gil stood beside her, silent, trying to be strong, but the pain in his eyes said everything. In their large, warm living room, usually filled with laughter, music, and children, a heavy quietness took over. The younger siblings sat on the couch, confused, watching their parents cry for the first time. Across states, the other Bates siblings began to gather. Zach drove through the night to reach home. Michaela called from Chicago, her voice shaking. Lawson posted a message online. Not defensive, not angry, just heartbreakingly human. "We love our family. Please pray for Erin and Chad." There's always more to the story than headlines. Meanwhile, the internet continued its chaos. Endless discussions, theories, sympathy, and doubt. To some they were victims. To others they were fallen idols. But in that moment, behind the walls of the small holding cell, none of that mattered. Erin's tears fell quietly onto the table as she whispered, "I just want to go home." Chad reached out, his voice breaking as he said, "We will. Somehow we will." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The bright Tennessee sky darkened. And as the first raindrops began to fall on the courthouse roof, it felt as if heaven itself was weeping for them. The world outside waited for answers. Days had passed since Erin and Chad were taken into custody, but no one truly knew why. Rumors filled the silence. Whispers of misunderstanding, misplaced documents, even betrayal. The media speculated, fans divided, but those who truly knew Erin and Chad refused to believe the worst. Inside the gray walls of the county jail, Erin sat quietly by the window, her Bible resting open on her lap. She hadn't slept in days. The cold air pressed against her skin, but her thoughts were far away, back home, where her children were asking when Mommy and Daddy would come back. Chad, held in a separate room, spent his hours writing notes, letters to Erin, to his children, to God. He had always been the calm one, the man who built homes, repaired hearts, and found peace in hard work. But now, even his steady hands shook. Then on the third day the silence finally broke. A new report came out from the sheriff's office, one that changed everything. The charges weren't about violence or theft or anything dark. It was a clerical misunderstanding, a paperwork error connected to a charity project Chad had volunteered for months ago. Some missing documents, a misfiled name, and suddenly an innocent act had turned into a criminal accusation. What began as a small administrative confusion had spiraled out of control. The moment the truth reached Gil and Kelly Jo, they broke down in tears, not of anger, but of relief. Their children, though shaken, were innocent. The system had made a mistake, and now slowly, the truth was coming to light. Back in her cell, Erin didn't cry when she heard. She just closed her eyes, whispered a prayer, and finally exhaled the breath she'd been holding since that morning. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds began to part, and light spilled through the small window above her head. She looked up. Not because she was free yet, but because she knew freedom was coming. Meanwhile, online the tone shifted. Hashtags that once questioned her now turned into support. Hashtag pray for Erin and Chad became hashtag justice for the Paines. Messages poured in, words of love, apology, and faith. But even as the public started to see the truth, Erin and Chad's hearts were marked forever. They had learned how fragile peace could be, how quickly faith can be tested, and how painfully slow truth can rise. Still they chose forgiveness. That night, as they were told they'd soon be released, Erin whispered through the small gap between their rooms, "We made it, Chad. God never left." Chad smiled faintly, tears filling his eyes. He never does. And outside, in the quiet streets of Tennessee, the town that once watched in disbelief now waited in silence, waiting for the couple they loved to come home again. The morning of their release began quietly. The air outside the county jail was still, the streets empty, the clouds just beginning to break apart. A small crowd had gathered beyond the gates, family, friends, and neighbors who had stood by the Paines through every uncertain hour. When the doors finally opened, the sound of metal echoed through the corridor. Erin stepped out first, her eyes tired but soft, her spirit heavier yet unbroken. Chad followed close behind, his shoulders straight, his faith unshaken. The first face they saw was Kelly Jo, standing with tears already streaming down her cheeks. She didn't wait. She ran forward, her arms wrapping around Erin in an embrace that seemed to stop time itself. Gil stood a few steps back, his hands trembling, his voice caught somewhere between prayer and disbelief. There were no speeches, no cameras allowed past the barriers, just family, just love. Erin clung to her mother, whispering, "I just want to go home." Kelly Jo nodded, whispering back, "You are home now." The drive back through the Tennessee hills felt endless. The familiar trees passed by slowly, every turn bringing them closer to the life they thought they had lost. Their little house stood waiting, the front porch light still on, the children's drawings still taped to the windows, untouched since that morning. As they stepped out of the car, the door swung open. For small voices cried out, "Mommy! Daddy!" The sound hit like sunlight breaking through clouds. Erin dropped to her knees, catching her children in her arms, her sobs muffled against their laughter. Chad stood behind her, his eyes wet as he lifted the youngest into his arms. No one spoke for a while. No one needed to. Inside the house, everything looked exactly the same, except now, every small thing felt like a miracle. The smell of coffee, the creak of the old floorboards, the tiny handprints on the kitchen wall. All reminders that life could change in an instant, but love, real love, never disappears. That night, as the sun sank behind the hills, Erin sat again by the same window where it had all begun. The sky was peaceful, painted with orange and gold. Chad joined her, their fingers intertwined. The world outside had already moved on, new headlines, new stories. But for them, this moment mattered more than all the noise. Erin whispered, "We'll never forget what this felt like." Chad smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe some storms are meant to remind us what peace really means. The house was silent again, but not the kind of silence that brings fear. It was the silence of peace restored, of faith proven, of love that had survived the unthinkable. And as night fell over Tennessee, the Bates world, once shaken by confusion and loss, found light again. Not through explanation or apology, but through grace. Weeks had passed since that long, heavy morning. The world had begun to settle again, but for Erin and Chad, life would never be quite the same. Every day felt slower, more fragile, and somehow more beautiful. They hadn't spoken publicly since their release. The world waited, cameras, reporters, and fans still hoping to hear their side. But Erin and Chad stayed silent, choosing peace over noise. Until one Sunday evening, they finally stood before their small church community, the same place where they'd been married, baptized, and blessed so many times before. The sanctuary was quiet. Rows of familiar faces looked up at them with tears already forming. Erin held Chad's hand tightly, her fingers trembling. When she began to speak, her voice was soft, the kind of voice that carries both pain and peace. There are moments in life when everything you believe in is tested. When people say things about you that aren't true. When fear takes away your breath, and all you can do is cry out to God and ask, "Why?" Her voice broke, and the room fell utterly silent. Chad placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and continued, "We learned that faith isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about standing in the rain and trusting that God still sees you, even when the world doesn't." There were no lights, no press releases, just truth. Pure, human, raw truth. Erin looked out over the crowd, her parents, her children, her brothers and sisters, and smiled through her tears. "We forgive," she said softly. "Those who doubted, those who spoke without knowing. We forgive them all, because grace is greater than pain." A single tear fell down her cheek, glimmering in the dim church light. Then, from the back of the room, a small voice called out, one of their children. "Mommy, are you okay now?" Erin's heart nearly broke again, but this time from love, not sorrow. She nodded. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mommy's okay now." The congregation stood. One by one, they began to pray, quietly, tearfully, gratefully. Outside, the evening light filtered through the church windows, casting long golden streaks across the wooden floor. In that moment, there were no cameras, no accusations, no fear, only forgiveness. Erin and Chad stood hand in hand, surrounded by the family that never stopped believing, by a community that had learned how easily faith can be tested, and how powerfully it can be restored. As the last prayer ended, Erin lifted her eyes toward the cross at the front of the church. Her tears fell freely now, but her smile held steady. The storm had passed. The truth had spoken. And Grace, quiet, eternal, and unbreakable, had the final word.